Hi, I'm Thomas Day. I'm your host of the Civic Patriot. If you had been watching last week's episode, I made reference to having on former Chicago Public Schools CEO Forrest Claypool on this week. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties today, and Forrest agreed to reschedule probably in a couple of weeks, so apologies about that. What we want to do right now is do something we call the No Grievance Zone. This is just a segment of our podcast where we discuss the events of the past week. The intention is not just to, as the name might suggest, air out grievances, but really delve into solutions and focus on what might be a solution to a problem that rose to the surface during the previous week. We record this on September 13. A few days ago, commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated in Utah. This, to me, marks a real generational event in our politics, I think. Charlie Kirk, in my judgment, really encapsulated and gave voice to a generation of young men who have been disaffected by a wave of social changes brought about largely by social media, a generation who has found themselves with an American dream that has been taken away from them, a generation of young men who have been socialized over social media. And his assassination this week, in my judgment, really calls on us to rethink so many conventions in our politics. And we call this the no grievance zone. I think this moment right now, it requires us to really resolve to fight against what I call incitement politics. Right now, today, and we are, 3 days since Charlie Kirk's killing, we have seen President Trump go on Fox News, even after Fox News provided him an avenue to provide a unifying message, asking him, is there a way to rein in some of the extremes on the right and left? He responded by saying and I quote, he didn't care about unifying the country. Senator Mike Lee, he's in his third term in Utah, today posted a of Kirk's open casket saying that, quote, don't forget what they did to him, Right now, as we record this, we have very little understanding of what Charlie Kirk's murderer, what his motivations were. We don't know. We know that he's a white guy. We know that he came from a middle-class Republican family. There is some suggestions that he was motivated by opposition, of course, to Kirk. That should be logical. He called him a fascist. Let me be also clear that Kirk had some opponents from the right, as well as his many opponents from the left, and we don't know for sure exactly what direction this guy was coming from. That didn't stop Lee from claiming the left that they did this to him. Every prominent Democrat politician in this country, every single one, has responded to the assassination of Charlie Kirk by expressing condolences, by offering a unifying message. And to their credit, many Republicans and many conservative commentators have responded the way they should. I regret that there certainly has been some folks in the rank and file using their social media pages to express some really regrettable messages about Charlie Kirk at a moment that didn't require it. We can recognize that Charlie Kirk had a career, built a media empire with rhetoric that repeatedly crossed the line into racism and anti-Semitism. There is a time and a place to observe that.
Yeah.
First, what we all need to do is express our condolences to his family, to his loved ones, to his friends, and the time will come to fully account for his career. But what I'm going to ask you, Jesse, is this politics of incitement. How do we, as what I think we might call ourselves mainstream Democrats, end this cycle, and especially a moment like this, and orient our political discourse towards solutions and not this endless game of who can out-incite who?
No, of course. I mean, first, because I'm going to be talking about how we can combat extremes on both sides, I do want to take a moment just to make sure to show a bit of a difference that makes me proud to be a Democrat. Right now, like you said, Tom, we have not seen a single major Democrat, elected Democrat, whatever it is, say anything like, oh, this is what conservatives, deserve, or this is what happens when conservatives don't get their way. What we did here, though, in this summer, after the assassination of Minnesota legislators, we had Senator Mike Lee saying, this is what happens when Marxists don't get their way. We had Donald Trump Jr. saying, without any evidence, that this is a Democratic ploy or whatever. So let's be clear that we should be proud of Democratic elected officials right now respecting the moment. But we all got social media. We've got Facebook. We're seeing others not taking that respectful tone. We're seeing others, frankly, saying the type of things that allow Republicans to be like, this is the lunacy of the left. And the reason for that, and again, reminder, this exists on both sides, right? The reason for that is because of that incitement politics that you said, or I call it institutional polarization. I've mentioned many times before, I've grown up in a way that makes it impossible for me to say the other side, Republicans, right? They're pure evil. I can't. My parents are Trump voters. The majority of my family, I got 100-something cousins, the majority of them voted for Trump. I used to be a professional MMA fighter, very, very conservative field, and I served in the Army with a lot of conservatives, right? I can't just point to the other side and say that it's pure evil. Instead, I have to maintain hope that our politics divided, our people do not have to be. And therefore, when we think about that, when we keep that faith that we can be united, the question becomes how? How can we address institutional polarization? How can we address the fact that 5 out of 6 districts at the state and federal level are not competitive? They don't have general elections that are really that meaningful. And instead, it's the primary election that dictates who wins or not. It's the primary election voters who are determining what a politician has to focus on in order to keep their job. And therefore, it's the primaries, the quote-unquote bases, the far left, far right, whatever you want to call it, that are making it so that extremism is politically beneficial. So if we want to rein in the extremism, if we want to create civility, if we want to actually, live up to that promise that we can find a common ground as Americans, we need to attack institutional polarization. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Specifically when it comes to, the lack of competitive districts, that's just gerrymandering. And again, that's done by both sides, right? There's also things we can look into that are a little more radical, ranked choice voting, multiple member districts, whatever it is, it just has to be, we have to make politicians, if they want to keep their jobs, which guess what's a pretty normal thing, most people want to keep their jobs, they have to actually address the concerns of the majority of voters. They have to actually be concerned about general voters. And maybe I'm being optimistic, maybe I'm just being crazy here, it's been a long week. But I think that if we can do that, if we can have greater alignment with the concerns of general voters, then we can address the root cause between a lot of the vultures we're seeing in society right now, which you kind of mentioned at the beginning, is that American dream, that promise that if you work hard, you can earn a better life for yourself and your family. That dream is dead for so many, especially my generation. I'm a millennial, especially the generation coming after me or the ones after that. That dream is dying, and unless we're able to address political extremism, unless we're able to make it actually okay to want to stand together, to want to have some semblance of political unity, we're not going to be able to address these much larger problems either. We're going to be focusing on Republicans are the enemies, Democrats are the enemies, but guess what? That's just not true. The enemy is poverty. The enemy is the unbelievable cost of living. The enemy is the crisis of unaffordability, and that's what we have to be focusing on.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I laid out an objective of of beating back incitement politics. You respond with institutional fixes we can make. Open primaries. You didn't say it, but ranked choice voting is ranked choice voting is a potential solution. Gerrymandering reform, which of course Democrats in Washington have put to in front of Congress to end gerrymandering, to reform how we draw the lines of congressional districts. I think, and I agree with all of that, I think there's another concern, and that is this. If you and I and a room full of people, some Republicans, some Democrats, watched the events in Utah from this past week, we would not, if we were in front of people physically, say, this guy had it coming, right? We operate and we have conversations with one another in person in a much different way, with a much different tone than we do online. I think a topic that does not get enough discussion is our addiction to social media and how we might end political discourse that is just conducted in a much different way online than we converse in person. That, I think, is at a social level part of the solution as well. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, technology has brought the world to our fingertips. I was born in 1996, right? By the time I was in elementary school, social media started. And, the promise was that we would be able to connect with each other better. But in reality, with the world at our fingertips, thanks to technology, we've pushed each other apart. And it is toxic. It is a pillar of division where extremism just becomes so easy. You can say things that are provocative. You can say things that are just plain damn wrong without any semblance of accountability because of putting it on a Facebook post. The lack of face to face interaction, the lack of actual consequences if you go over the line, it just makes it so that extremism is easier. And again, I genuinely, with every fiber in my being, I do not think that we as the people, right, American people, whatever you want to say, I don't think we are inherently divided. I don't think we are inherently politically extreme. I do think our politics is. I do think that our politics incentivizes extremism, but social media certainly makes it easier. Like, it's just insane how disrespectful somebody can be over text or messenger on comments in Facebook. And yet they won't do that in person. In person, it's just, one, I mean, you risk getting punched in the face, but two, it's just more that connection. I mean, it's wild, man. And I might be biased here. The majority of my friends, I fundamentally disagree with politically, but I love them. And I actually like the fact that we don't agree with each other. I like the fact that there's diversity in ideology, but that's not a reality on Facebook or whatever other social media, the TikTok, whatever. I don't know.
So we talked about, political reforms, social reforms, as far as conversing and supporting a discourse over online. I also want to talk about our very society, absent what we're doing online, and our spiritual strength as people. We are less likely to go to church. We are less likely to places like the VFW hall and learn from our neighbors. We're less likely to know our own neighbors' names. We're less likely to go and get involved with apolitical civic institutions like, remember the Elks Club?
Yeah.
You might not, right? It does still exist. Their headquarters are about 2 miles from me right about this lack of social strength that has been, growing in ourselves over the past 10, 20 years?
Yeah.
Can we dig deeper to figure out how we stop this era of incitement politics than even some of the issues that we've discussed and others that we see discussed in other formats?
Yeah. I mean, everything you said there is correct about there being less civic organizations that are being, actually attended, whether that's a Legion, VFW, whatever else, the church attendance, not knowing your own neighbor, all of these things are true. I think it's two problems that have to be overcome. One is actually an economic question. I think it's called third spaces. That's what a lot of fancy folks are calling it, right? My generation, we don't have that anymore. Like, don't get me wrong, I might be the exception. I still go to the bar quite often, but most folks don't have that option because it costs so much damn money. Literally, my generation grew up to where we can't just go outside and make friends, because the minute you go outside, you're going to be spending money somehow, some way. Everything costs money, and we just have less economic insecurity, therefore less incentives to be able to have those personal relationships. At the same time, again, that's one problem. Another one is that these organizations that are supposed to bring people together, they're faltering, plain and simple. Okay, we can complain about Legion membership going down, church membership going down, and let me be clear, I'm a proud member of my American Legion. I read my Bible every day and consider myself a man of faith, but I'm willing to admit that legions aren't appealing to 29-year-old men like myself. It's not appealing to have this formal structure where you're supposed to never ever disagree with the commander or whatever else. Churches, and again, I say this as a devout Catholic, they especially have problems. I mean, literally, I still struggle with my religious identity on a daily basis. I struggle to overcome the atrocities that have happened within the Catholic Church to still consider myself a Catholic, right? So we have to reform and improve these organizations so that they can live up to that promise of being a civic organization. We need to have economic security for families so that they can actually go out and enjoy life, build relationships. And if we do that, I believe, and again, maybe I'm being optimistic, but I believe we then have a opportunity, a moment for a moral awakening. And let me be crystal clear, because that word morality or whatever gets used a lot by the other side. Morality, how I'm speaking of it, that's this moral awakening. It doesn't mean having more hatred. It doesn't mean having less inclusion. It doesn't mean fueling division further. No. What I wish for is a moral awakening, the semblance that we see each other as our neighbors. Protect thy neighbor. We see that, and we're willing to have faith in those relationships that we have and go out and talk to one another and love each other and, have that semblance of community that has just died.
Thank you so much, Jesse. If you like what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and Spotify. Until next time, he's Jesse Rojo, and I'm Thomas Day.